Okay, year 10, our first poem for this week is She Dwelt Among the Untrodden Ways by William Wordsworth. Go ahead and read the poem before we get started, even though we will have done so in the introduction meet. She dwelt among the untrodden ways, beside the springs of Dove, a maid whom there were none to praise, and very few to love. A violet by a mossy stone, half hidden from the eye, fair as a star when only one is shining in the sky. She lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be. But she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. Okay, William Wordsworth is a super famous poet from the 17 and 1800s in a really famous era of literature and art known as the Romantic era. So if you've never heard his name before, now you have. I won't go on about him, but just it's worth knowing that he's written many famous poems, made a living being a poet during his lifetime, and is well known as a famous romantic poet. Okay, and romantic doesn't mean like love, it means an era of literature and art and music and expression when the writers and artists were focusing on emotional expression, connection with nature. And one of the reasons I have all the pictures that I'm trying to capture some of the imagery from the poem on this slide is all the connections to natural images that are in this poem, even though it's very short. Okay, so I tried to capture the idea of rivers and springs and violets and mossy rocks and star in the night sky. And then down here, I tried to find just something kind of rustic, grave looking, not too, refined or modern, okay? Because one, this was written a really long time ago, and two, it talks about how she lived in a really remote place, okay? So let's carry on. First off, as far as a summary of this poem, this seems to be about a girl who we find out at the end of the poem is named Lucy, that she lives a quiet and unnoticed life. And so when she dies, not many people notice, but the speaker is one person who is greatly affected by her death. And we can interpret as to why the speaker is greatly affected by her death. There's a couple interpretations. The tone can be described as elegiac and mournful, honoring, admiring, and tender. This poem isn't necessarily an elegy, but it has elements of an elegy. I think I have that on the next slide. So, and then of course, purpose is possibly to honor the life of Lucy, possibly to express grief over the loss and death of Lucy, and possibly to remember someone who would have otherwise been forgotten, or bring attention to someone who never got attention in her seemingly short life. Okay. This poem is not written in free verse, it is written in verse. It is made up of 3 quatrains. There is regular rhythm in this poem. It has a very strong, like you could sing it to a tune, okay? It's really regular rhythm, and the rhythm is iambic. So pa-pum, 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 you can find that in there. And then the rhyme scheme, it follows the alternating end rhyme of lines. So every other line rhymes. We can click back and have a look. It's easy to spot though. Ways and praise, dove and love. Stone, one, close. I, sky, no, oh, and be me. Okay, real solid. And again, sometimes it's my accent that maybe doesn't make the connection rhyme-wise. And for just to note, William Wordsworth was an English poet, and okay, I'm back on the right side. So sometimes my accent doesn't do it justice. And as far as form goes, there's kind of elements of elegy and ballad in this poem. A ballad is a poem that tells a story, and an elegy, of course, as you know from your poetry terms, is a poem that laments the death of someone. Okay, as for analysis, there's lots to say, even though it's a very short poem, only 12 lines long, but there's a lot of emotion here. And there's a lot, even though it's simply stated, there's a lot going on. So let's start with stanza 1. In stanza 1, it says, "She dwelt among the untrodden ways." And untrodden ways is maybe a little bit fancy way to say places that are remote and lonely. So if people tread on paths or ways, like they're well trafficked, then those are like popular places, okay? And to dwell somewhere that's untrodden, like you could almost get the image of like an overgrown path or something remote, away from all the other people. It could be like unpopular, but for me it brings up like an image of someone who lives close to nature and like away from maybe society or big crowds. This could be part of the reason this girl is not well known, is that she lives remotely. There could be other reasons for it too, but that's how it opens, is that she lives kind of tucked away, and then you get more of this natural environment picture with the next line that says, "Beside the springs of Dove." I don't know, I have these kind of out of order here. Springs of Dove is my third bullet point, and Maid is my second. So I'm going to skip down to this bullet point here. Springs of Dove creates, you get imagery of water, flowing water even. If it's a spring and a river, you have a lot of sensory appeal. I mean, it's visual, but it's also... there's also sound appeal with springs and rivers because of the sound of like moving water. And for me, that would suggest something peaceful and calm. I mean, I'm really drawn to the sound of moving water. And so to me, there's the ideas of calmness, serenity, peacefulness, and the peace is even furthered with the name of the river is the Dove River, okay? And doves are well-known symbols for both peace and purity. And this will, the purity could also link to her status as a maid, okay? In the third line, she's referred to as a maid, and it's doubtful that she's a maid as in like someone who cleans the house or something like that. It is likely short for maiden, which is more a reflection of her marital status, okay? That she would be young and unmarried, okay? That's... So don't think, oh, she cleans the kitchen or something like that. That's likely not true, okay? And maid probably fit the rhythm better than maiden, okay? I mean, I wasn't there when he wrote it, so I don't know. But maid or maiden can refer to a young girl who cleans, but it also can just mean a young girl, okay? So, like I said, it's probably more a reflection of her age and marital status. And by marital status, I mean not married, okay? Okay, the next and analysis point I have here is a collection of words that establish that this girl, and so far in the first stanza we don't know her name, that she lived a quiet life without any public status. And we know that she lived likely close to nature or even in nature with the references to the river. Excuse me. So, untrodden, none, and very few. Even though none and very few are talking about people, it's talking about like population and the idea of being tucked away, not mixing with very many people. And it sounds, possibly like just not known to very many people. Now, we don't know if that is that completely geographical, like she just lives way out in the sticks and doesn't get out much. Are there other reasons? Is she unsocial, or is she kept away from other people? Hard to know. It's not really talked about too much. We just get some hints. We get hints that none to praise, okay, and whom there were none to praise. It means that she didn't have the, like admiration, or she's not really being talked about or admired by anybody, and very few to love. Meaning, like, there were just a couple of people in the world who she was close to or dear to. So this, we can think about this in a couple of different ways. Is she just somebody who lives a very quiet life, like on a farm, nobody knows her, and the speaker happens to be, I don't know, maybe he's somebody that lives close by, or he is somehow acquainted with her, or maybe a relative. We don't know who this girl is, but seems to be known by only a few people, and the speaker being one of them. So we don't know if she's just private or if she is possibly neglected or overlooked, right? So there's two ways to possibly interpret it, okay? And I'm not sure that there's one that's better than the other. So you can think about how both of them flavor the poem, okay? And it's the phrases "none to praise, very few to love." I find them very emotive and create some amount of sympathy. If she's private and doesn't want to be praised and known by very many people, and she's happy that way, then it's less sympathetic. But if for some reason she's maybe kept away, or the people that do, the few people who do love her don't praise her, like they don't use their words to encourage her, that is sympathetic in my mind. Okay. Also, there is very few multisyllabic words in this stanza. A maid whom there were none to praise and very few to love. Every single one of those words in the last two lines is single syllable, and there's only a few in the first two lines that are more than one syllable. And there's a connection there to like simplicity and maybe the humility of her existence. And obviously she's someone who's not known, not popular, not admired. It's a very humble life that she lives. All right. So a couple of questions here at the end for you to just think about. Is the speaker confessing love for this girl, or simply feeling saddened that she was a neglected person? Like somebody who has been overlooked has died, and I feel bad that there's not that many people who are going to miss her. Or is he building up, and in the final lines he says, oh the difference to me, like that he's affected. So is he one of the few who loves her and he's being a bit shy? Maybe it's something he hadn't gotten around to admitting, maybe they were both shy, and he had kind of admired her from afar, uh, and then she passed away. It, we're left to wonder. Okay, he certainly knows who she is, and he is praising her in the next stanza because he says none to praise. Like there wasn't anybody who admired her, but clearly the speaker in the poem is someone who admired her, but maybe he never said it out loud. Hard to know. Okay, so we don't know if this girl again is isolated, private, just happens to live out in the sticks and doesn't care about getting out much, or somebody who lives out in the country and alone and kind of forgotten and isolated. Okay, so and to what degree did she interact with the speaker is hard to know. Okay, all right. Moving on to stanza 2. Now these are metaphors and similes to describe the girl. Okay, so in stanza 1, she's referred to as a maid whom there were none to praise and very few to love. And then he continues, a violet by a mossy stone half hidden from the eye, fair as a star when only one is shining in the sky. Right? These the flower which is a violet is the name of the flower. I tried to show you here what one looks like, and then she's compared to a star. Okay, both are supposed to be, I believe, a solid interpretation for this. I don't think he's just like, hey, look, a flower. Hey, look, a star. All right, don't read it like that. This is about this girl, Lucy, okay? And so she's being compared to a violet by a mossy stone that's half hidden from the eye. So there's this big mossy stone, and she's like a flower that's there by the mossy stone and kind of hidden behind it. Okay, the stone is bigger than the violet, maybe. So what can we interpret, or what does this metaphor suggest? Well, first off, flowers are beautiful, and possibly fragile. Okay, especially when you put them side by side with a big heavy rock. Okay, and you get the idea too, like something that's mossy usually is something kind of old. Moss grows on things that have been there for a while. And they usually grow in kind of shadowy, that kind of gives a place kind of a forgotten look. Okay, if your house starts growing moss on it, it means you're not really taking care of it. It's been there a long time. Sometimes you find old like rock walls with moss growing. I think I put a picture like that here. Yeah, these rocks have been stacked like this for a while if they've got this kind of moss growing on them. Okay, so with this image, mossy stone, it gives the place where she is. Okay, if she's the flower and she's hidden from view by this mossy stone, you get the idea like that she's kind of off in a forgotten corner. Okay, and that ties directly in with this untrodden place. She dwelt among the untrodden places. Like she's a forgotten person, not well known, and she's a well kept secret. Okay, but comparing her to a flower would suggest that she's beautiful, and like I said already, that placing the image of the flower next to the stone could be emphasizing like a fragility and a softness. Like daintiness, a femininity of this girl, but maybe living in sort of a harsh, rough, kind of carving an existence out in the country and nature. Okay, or I don't know. I guess if you want to interpret it even further and go beyond nature. maybe somebody that she lives with is like the stone, and they're hard and they keep her kind of away from other people. You could maybe imagine a, you know, father figure or something. I mean, I don't know. Um, uh, if it's supposed to be that figurative, it's hard to know, because we only get this simple, natural image. Okay, but he's comparing her to a flower, and again, another thing that's suggested or emphasized through contrast or juxtaposition is like the vibrant color of a flower against the dull colors of stone and moss. I tried to pick a picture here that's got a little bit of kind of moss on the stone. You can see how those are quite dull colors, and a violet like this next to it stands out. Okay, so you get this idea of maybe some striking beauty, that this girl has. That even though she's hidden away, when you do see her, she stands out. Okay, maybe it's her surroundings that are the mossy stone, that she lives in this maybe old rundown place out in the country, and she's a kind of in contrast to this beautiful young lady living in this kind of rustic place. Don't know, okay? But these are things you want to think about what the image suggests, and so I'm trying to develop that a little bit for you, okay? And then the second image is of a star. This time, because it uses the word as, fair as a star, we would classify this as a simile, okay? And the whole two lines, I mean, you see how each image is given two lines, okay? The violet picture is given two lines, and then the star image, okay? So as far as the simile is, it says fair as a star. And now fair in this instance would not mean like just, okay? Fair as in an older definition for the word, and that would be like nice to look at, okay? If someone is fair, they are pretty, okay? And the rest of it reads, when only one is shining in the sky. So stars are no doubt, everyone will agree. Stars are beautiful. They are shiny and they sparkle in the night sky. But he's saying it's as beautiful as that first one out in the sky, like when it's all by itself and it's the only, shining star. Okay, so this is what she's being compared to. So we have some things that are possibly suggested by this image, okay? One is that she is striking, okay? That would go along with this idea of the like drab colors against the vibrant flower colors. That the girl's looks are striking, okay? Maybe she's like being compared like she's light in the darkness. Maybe she brings light to the speaker's life. Like when he sees her, she's like brightens his life. Okay, speaking metaphorically here. If the speaker and the girl have some kind of romantic connection or interest, possibly, there's a sense of like direction. You know how like stars can, you can navigate by the stars kind of thing. I mean, you could develop that kind of idea. But also there's brilliance that is attributed to stars. So maybe he thinks she's like brilliant in like a clever way. Okay, there's all kinds of things that this could suggest. Okay, now he is saying fair. Okay, so the focus is first of all on her beauty. Okay, and just like a single shining star in the night sky is beautiful, that's what he's saying. Okay, and so I'm teasing out a few other connections that you can get from stars, but remember that the word that he says fair as, okay, so he's like the focus or primary interpretation should be on the visual aspect, how she could be visually seen as a star. The other thing too, I've said alternatively, the focus is on a single star, okay? Possibly this could connect further to the girl's isolation, okay? Maybe she's living in this remote place, and maybe the speaker is too, and she's like a bright spot out there in this place where there's maybe not many social options, or maybe the people who live there aren't sociable. But I mean, you get the idea that it's remote, because untrodden just means it's not a well-traveled place. So keep that in mind. Okay, and then I've continued here too. If she is a character who is lamentably emotionally neglected but still beautiful and radiant, she could stand out like a single star in a dark sky. Like if she is this striking beauty, and she just kind of lives tucked away and ignored maybe by the few people that are in her life, but still is a radiant beauty, then sort of that like emotional darkness around her, she would be shining or contrasting too. Okay, I mean, you can read this poem just like, there's this beautiful girl, she lives out in the country, the poet knows her, she dies young, and he feels sad, that not very many people are going to grieve her. I mean, that's a kind of a straight up read. I'm teasing now just a little bit, like, if she's possibly sort of neglected or isolated, then there's kind of more emotion and more sympathy. But just to be clear, it's not clear to me which it is. Okay, so when you're talking about a poem, you can talk about levels of meaning, or alternative interpretations. Like one interpretation could be, another interpretation could be, this other thing. Okay, and it's good to be like suggest meaning instead of like being adamant that this is how it is and this is her backstory, but rather to say, it suggests this, it could mean this, the poet could be showing us this. Okay, that kind of interpretation or openness to several interpretations is a good approach to literature. Okay, the phrase "only one," okay, here, when only one, as far as digging into meaning, could mean that she's unique. Certainly she's an individual, okay, but maybe she's the only one for him. If you're interpreting this as a romantic interest of his, it could be like, he's got eyes for her, he's got his eyes set on her, and she's the one for him. When you do talk about the first star that comes out in the night sky, it's often the planet Venus. And so you could make a connection to that, as far as Venus and connection to women and romance and that kind of stuff. Okay. Or again, it could be this like lonely, isolated idea. Or it's both. Okay, like maybe she's an isolated girl who he's totally in love with, and she's the one for him. Okay, and once again, just a mention that the images that the poet uses are natural. They come from nature, and so that's a key feature of romantic poets, is sort of idealizing natural settings and elements of nature, but it also could suggest like that she is a natural beauty, or that there's something real and simple like nature about her. Okay, something kind of real and humble, down to earth. Okay, but like kind of honest to goodness. Okay, all right. As far as stanza 3 goes, she lived unknown, and few could know when Lucy ceased to be. but she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. All right, so just as in her life she was little known, this idea of few to love, so her death is unnoticed by others. Few could know. Okay, like the fact if she's not known, if she's not popular, and she lives out in the sticks, not very many people are going to notice when she dies. Okay, obviously the speaker notices because he's the one speaking in the poem. Okay, and whether this is from Wordsworth's personal experience or not is unknown. I guess there's a collection of what are called the Lucy poems, and but it's hard to make a connection to somebody, a specific person in his life that's this Lucy person. So it is a good reminder that not all poetry is autobiographical. It could just be an artistic way to explore an emotion, and that's what we're going to assume is true here. That it could just be a imagined scenario. Okay, and the second line says that Lucy ceased to be. Okay, and we could class this as a euphemism. Okay, which he doesn't just say when Lucy was dead, okay, when she died, okay, ceased to be, has that effect of like kind of softening the sting or the reality of death. And it's not until this 10th line of the poem that we find out that she has a name and that her name is Lucy. But there's a good connection there with withholding her name until this final stanza that has a strong connection with her not being known, not being widely or well known. And so just as her name has been withheld, it could reflect or relate to how many people would not know her name. Okay, well, that girl, or I saw this girl, I don't know who she is, kind of thing. Okay, and then in her grave, in the second to last line, is quite a bit starker way to express death. Okay, and because we've been told she's a maid, we have, and she's been compared to flowers and stars, and we've been told how beautiful she is. We have this image of a young, beautiful girl in a fresh dug grave. Okay, I don't know if it's fresh, but in a dug grave, because we're thinking this the setting that she lives in is rustic and rural, and so you even people who are buried in the cities are you dig the earth to bury their bodies, and it's got a earthy feel to it as well. But to use the word grave, we've got a lot of connotations with that word. Not only are graves sort of cold and dark, but it reminds us obviously of death, of graveyards, tombstones, and there's to be buried in the earth is final, and you have that sort of earth to earth, dust to dust image of that. That phrase, I have it there in the notes. It comes from the English burial prayer that you've probably heard at least once in your life. If not, then I'm happy to introduce it to you. But it's sort of like it comes from Christian belief that God created man and that he created him from the dust of the ground and breathed life into him and breathed his soul into him. But then when the curse of sin came and people were then kind of fated to die, then part of it is like going back to the dust that you came from. And so, it's a reminder that when our bodies cease to breathe and our blood ceases to pump around our bodies, that decomposition will start, and we will return to the basic elements of the earth, okay? And it's not a pleasant thought, but it is a realistic and, you know, reality that each mortal will face, okay? But using the word grave is a lot more powerful than to say ceased to be. Okay, ceased to be just sounds kind of like, you know, she maybe magically disappeared or something like that. But grave is much more physical, that her body has been placed into the earth and we covered her over because she's no longer breathing and no longer, you know, walking through the you know, woods and along the river and getting water from the spring kind of thing. And the idea that she's young, it adds to the sadness of it, to imagine her young and beautiful and her life over. And we don't know how she's died. We have no idea. Okay. We'll assume some sickness. Okay. But could be an accident too. No idea. But here at the end, it says, but, so she lived unknown and few could know when Lucy ceased to be. But she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. Okay, and probably I should read that with a little more emotion. And oh, the difference to me! Exclamation point. Okay, got a lot of emoting going on here at the end with the oh and the exclamation point. Okay, so the poet is saying, even though there's not going to be very many other people affected by her death, he is affected and grieved by her death. The fact that she's in the grave makes a difference to him. Now, if we're going with the, you know, sort of romantic interest, or at least sort of, you know, somebody's got some affection for her, even if they're just friends, okay, then her loss is, you know, it's emotional, it's grieving his heart, but, you know, especially if there was maybe a romantic interest and she's died young, then kind of future hope or dreams are lost there. If this is a case where she's just somebody he knew, and it's not exactly that he had romantic interest, but he's just more affected because so few people are going to grieve for her, like that affects him emotionally. You know, and it could be both. It could be both make him feel something. Okay. I've already mentioned, I'm just making sure I've covered all the notes, that the exclamation point and the use of O, especially with the use of the caesure here, really slows this down. But she is in her grave, and oh, the difference to me. Okay, there's an intensity of feeling that comes with the O and the exclamation point, but the way he's phrased it, the difference, is more like understatement. Okay, and oh, the difference, like this makes a difference to me. It's really an understated way to talk about your grief. Okay, if she was somebody maybe that was his friend, or he had romantic interest, or just a neighbor girl that he admired from afar because she was pretty and nice to look at, or whatever, and to not be able to see her and not enjoy her company, is going to make a difference. Even though it's going to make a very little difference to very many people, it makes a difference to the speaker. Okay, and again, there could be added emotion or added sentiment, added sympathy with the idea that it's shame that I'm one of very few people who are going to, you know, maybe be there at the burial, be there standing, and very few people that will remember who she even was. Like that she was this, you know, she lived her life, and just very few people are going to be bothered or even know that she's died. Okay, and that, you know, that can be, that's kind of a sad reality, that's lamentable. Okay, what I have here in the paradoxical effect, it to say this so understated, when I say paradoxical effect, it's like the idea here is that even though he's said it very understated, there's great meaning, that there could be the sense that it's going to make a huge difference, okay? That her absence, her death is going to impact him greatly, even though he's said it in a very simplistic way. Also, it's interesting too that he's claiming that this girl was like unknown and her life will be forgotten. Yet here we are. If this is a real person, okay, if we're talking about a real person here, we're 200-300 years later talking about her and remembering her. Okay, so that's kind of a paradox in itself as well. That he he's written a poem for someone he fears will be forgotten, and this is a way to make sure that she isn't, is to be a really famous poet and write a poem about her. Again, not sure if this was a real person or if it's written maybe about people who live small but humble, modest private lives, and when they die, it doesn't cause a very big splash. But that doesn't mean that they weren't loved and that their life wasn't valuable, and that there aren't those quietly grieving. Okay, my last two slides are on that line. Okay, it would be good for you to pause the video right now and do some thinking about other messages. I've kind of already hinted at some that I have, but when you think about this poem and the images and the short little story that it tells, are there messages or is there meaning that you hear or see in this poem? It would be good to write those down before you hear mine, because mine, I have some ideas, but I don't have all the ideas. Okay, and if you pause for a minute and think about meaning that you get from this, that's important to record it. So go ahead and pause the video right now and write down, just take 2 minutes to think about meaning that you think is being created. And then you can listen to my ideas. Okay, so here's some thoughts about what could be, that people, when they read this poem, maybe things that strike them, make them ponder, that kind of thing. One thing for sure is that life can be short. Yeah, none of us are guaranteed the 70 years. Okay, that's a clear reminder that's here. And also life can be quiet and unremarkable. There's just a sort of plain non-exciting life. Okay, and when a person dies, sometimes it's just a very small circle of people who grieve. Okay, and that's real. Okay, when celebrities die or really famous people die, it seems like the whole world's sad, and that's important too. But there's plenty of grieving that goes on that's very personal and quiet. Okay, and that's my second point. There is that people are often grieving quietly and grieving alone. Okay, and that's a good reminder anytime to remember that you don't know who's grieving and who's hurting, and what losses people are dealing with. And doesn't always have to do with death. Okay, people can be hurting over a lot of things, and it's a good reminder for us to be caring and gentle and not assume that everybody's fine and nobody's got issues. Okay, but grief can be, the speaker definitely has quiet, private grief in this poem, and that not very many people are going to even know about. Okay, because they don't know the girl, so it's hard for them to be upset with him. Okay. Thirdly, we have opportunity to make sure those who've died are remembered. Okay, it's not worded fantastically, but this the idea that as the survivors of like somebody that we love has passed away, we have the opportunity to make sure they're remembered. Just like this poem has been written in honor of Lucy, whoever she may be, we can honor those who have died, and honor their memory in different ways. Okay, so that it's a reminder that as the living, we can remember and honor those who have passed away. That's not to mean like stay stuck in your grief or you can't move past it kind of thing, but to honor people's memory and to pause and maybe at least once a year on around the time they died, or whatever, so that their memory isn't lost, can be very honoring to a person's life, even if they weren't super well known. And the next one here, you don't have to be popular or outstanding for your life to be meaningful to someone. Okay, I think that's really true about the Lucy character. She's not popular. She's not well known. She's not famous. She's not even remarkable. Okay, but she was very meaningful to somebody, and that somebody is the speaker of the poem. And so that's important to remember. Sometimes the numbers of people that you're important to isn't what's important. Okay, it could be a few special somebodies that your time and your presence and your friendship is important to. Okay, and then lastly, sometimes unknown, unexpected people are affected by death. It could be, if you go kind of like with the interpretation that this speaker is sort of like admiring her from afar, that sometimes you don't even know who is going to be affected by the death of someone. It could be like because we always think, oh, the family, oh, the best friend, that we expect those people to be grieving, but sometimes there's people on the fringes, or with a connection that we either don't know about, or are surprised at their sense of loss when somebody dies. Like, well, we weren't their best friend, or you weren't in their family. That doesn't matter. Death and loss and grief can really be profoundly impactful to a number of different people. So that's important to keep in mind too, when being sensitive to people and their grief and their sense of loss when a death occurs. Okay, I know this isn't a really friendly topic, but these are our poems that deal with death, and people tend to write poems in lament of death. It can be a really healing way to process grief. Even if the grief that you have is not related to a death, there's something healing and expressive about poetry. So consider it if you have something that you're grieving or processing. You never know. Writing a poem to express, even if you don't ever show it to anybody, to express those emotions can be really helpful. Okay, that's all for this poem.